Hello, I'm Trudy Charles, and in this episode of the Building Guide series, I'm going to be showing you how to create some custom trees just like these ones. Before we get started, let's just go over why you should always use custom trees instead of the default trees. For a start, you can't deny that the Minecraft default trees look good at all. Next to a good build, they're just horrible and unrealistic. Secondly, custom trees are quite often the perfect solution to adding atmosphere and setting to a build. A good example of this is my latest build, the Chinese Shrine. In this build I used a texture pack to create pink leaves so that I could build some Sakura trees, and I think it absolutely worked a treat in front of this shrine. So now you might be thinking, well yeah, whatever Trudy Charles, that looks cool, but I'll never be able to create a good looking tree like that. Well, that's where you're wrong, because you can. Stay right here because I'm going to be showing you how. Here's how to build a standard oak tree. So to begin with, let's make it simple and break it down into some segments. First off, we need to create the trunk. Now for the trunk, try to make sure nothing is symmetrical, add a lot of different height variations and diagonals with the blocks, and try to avoid building trunks like this or like this. Also, something which is nice to add is curvature, just like this one. Now the next part is the branches, but I like to call this the framework because it really sets the shape for what the tree is going to be. When I build an oak tree, sometimes I don't do every single branch. Sometimes I'll build the branches at the same time I add the leaves, but as someone who's just learning, I would recommend completing all the branches first, and you should do this by just flying around the tree and placing the logs in random curved ways. And then you can add other branches sticking out from these ones. Now after this, just fly around the tree and get rid of any blocks that don't look right. And what I mean by this is branches which look too thick or too long, just destroy those blocks. And now you should have the basic framework or the branches for your tree. Now, a common thing which a lot of people get wrong when it comes to doing the leaves is placing them everywhere and aiming to just fill in everything, which is very wrong. Here, I'll show you how. So this is a typical English oak, and here's the thing. Only looking at where the leaves are, what three things can you see? Well, congratulations if you said leaves, wood, and the sky. Now the sky is the important part. Here's the thing with the sky. When you're placing the leaves, you want to create clusters on the ends of the branches. When it comes to doing the inside, try to stay away from the main branches, and actually inside I would recommend not placing many blocks at all, because it'll block up the gaps between the clusters on the outside. In my opinion, seeing the sky through the tree looks a lot better, but if you prefer a more solid look like I was doing in the time lapse before, then go for it. The same method of placing the clusters should still apply, the only difference is now you're placing more leaves on the inside. Just don't fall into the trap of filling everything in. Remember, the leaves on the inside should still be clusters. Now, the leaves should be placed in random ways. Sometimes I like to use the method of placing and breaking the blocks so that they're on a diagonal and look only just attached. And this makes the clusters look a lot less dense. In other words, as Planet Minecraft judge Mr. J says, so that they're only connected by 1 pixel. Oh, but in my case, 8 pixels because I have a 128 by 128 resource pack on. However, I think majority of the leaves on the edges of the clusters should be connected this way, by 16 pixels. In my case, 128. I guess what I'm trying to say is diverge yourself from building clusters like this, which is very square and is coming back to the roots of Minecraft, the default trees. Alright, now here's a quick speed build of me finishing off the tree with the techniques I just mentioned. Also, just bear in mind that this is only one technique of creating trees, and certainly not the only way of doing it. In fact, you might just find your very own style, and that's perfect. But in this tutorial, I'm just going over what I typically do when creating trees. Anyways, hopefully now you should have an oak tree looking something like this. This tree is more or less just a basic simple tree because there isn't any canopies to it. I would recommend giving this a go before any of the following, which are a little more tricky. Okay, now let's move on to making a simple, dense, and relatively small pine tree. I think one of the most difficult things about creating a pine tree is the shape of it. The point at the top and the way the tree curves down and creates these large branches underneath. Placing random leaves around hoping to create this shape can be a bit difficult, especially for beginners. So what I like to do is create a bit of a template for the tree. And to do this, you just want to create 4 curves on each side of the tree. And this is just going to resemble the shape of what it's going to be. But this will change, it can go higher, it can go lower, and it probably will change as it does in this. But the main thing you're trying to do here is just get that general shape and see how thick that it's going to be. Placing the leaves is a little bit difficult to explain, but basically the leaves on the bottom of the tree should extend out more than the ones on the top, of course, and the ones on the bottom should come out in diagonal lines and nothing should be symmetrical. Also, try not to cover everything up and leave air in between the leaves. Alright, now what about a tall oak tree or a tall birch tree? Now, in case you're confused what I mean about tall, well, I mean that it has canopies. The tree that I demonstrated on at the start didn't have any canopies. It was kind of just small, yeah, that's the word. It was just small and didn't really have any interesting layers to it. Although do remember that the clustered leaves technique I used in the other tree definitely still does apply to this tall birch tree. So basically, when it comes to creating a tree with canopies, what you want to do is go a lot less lighter on the branches coming out from the trunk of the tree. In this case, I only used 3. And basically, the reason for this is because you don't want to cluster too much of the bottom half of the tree with leaves. You want to keep it even between the top and the bottom, so have an even spread amongst the whole tree. So as you would have just noticed, what I did was fill in the bottom half of the tree with leaves. And then only after I'd finished that, I extended up the branches to create the canopies above. When it comes to the top of the tree, try to only create 1 branch that comes up, or 2 maybe, and have just a few leaves on the top. Okay, now this pine tree is probably the trickiest of them all. It's where you create it so that you can fully see the branches coming out and you can really see where the leaves are and how they curve. This one is really quite different to the other pine tree because the other one's very dense and more confined with the branches and the leaves. So of course for that one, the leaves end up being a lot closer, whereas with this one, they're a lot more spread out and there's a lot more space between them, so it really gives that definition of where the leaves and branches are. Anyways, what I start out by doing is creating these curved diagonal leaves which curve down from the middle of the tree. Now I think when it comes to creating the leaves on the tree, it's best to start midway as I'm doing here, because if you were to start lower down on the tree, because these leaves droop down, they'll probably end up touching the ground and it won't look so nice. But of course it does depend how tall your pine tree is. Anyways, what you're trying to achieve with these leaves coming out is a few things. First of all, you're going to want to make sure that there's a lot of space in between them, especially on the lower ones. This should be around 1 to 2 blocks, although of course it does depend what the scale of the tree is. The thing is, with pine trees, the leaves on the bottom are coming straight out and the leaves midway are drooping down. Then the leaves higher up also droop down, but they're a lot smaller. So in Minecraft terms, you wouldn't be able to see them drooping down. They might just be 1 or 2 blocks coming out on a diagonal. And so that's exactly what I've tried to achieve here. On the bottom of the tree or underneath, the leaves just come out and they go straight. Whereas above them, they're a little bit more curved, and on top of that, they're a lot more curved and come down quite a lot. Then on the top of the tree, because it's getting a lot thinner, I only use 1 to 3 amounts of leaves and create them pointing down in a diagonal. I try not to make them point out too much in one direction and just try and curve them around to look nice. Just remember that this is a majority of the leaves. So essentially what I'm saying is that although the leaves halfway on the tree might curve down more, it's okay to add some which don't curve much at all, just because, you know, it adds some variety and it makes the tree look more realistic. Also, here's the same technique used on a bit of a taller pine tree, just so you can see what it would look like if it was taller. Alright, well, those were just the trees that I wanted to explain how to make in this video, but always remember that practice makes perfect. You shouldn't be expecting to just see this tutorial and then go and make it perfectly. It will take some practice and getting used to the style, and maybe you can even develop your own style. In fact, that's exactly how I learnt to create trees. And the thing is, once you know how to build a tree and you know what a tree looks like, you can build all sorts of cool stuff, just like this in my last video. Because this tree uses actually the exact same technique as the first tree I demonstrated on, it's just on a very, very large scale. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials just like this one. Oh, and by the way, if you do end up creating any of these trees, let me know how you go in my Discord server. The link for that is down in the description. And I'll see you next time. Bye.